Alright, so we're going to get started. I'm LaLa from LaLa Farm, and this is my husband Rick. We own 20 acres, about 40 miles west of Jacksonville, Florida. We are a small homestead. We raise meat goats and chickens, and we have some freezer hogs that we're working on right now. And we'll be getting some, probably a few dairy bulls within the next 8 or 12 months. If you're wondering about the LaLa, that is me. I'm LaLa. My eldest grandchild, when she first started talking, that's what she called me. So it kind of stuck, and now everybody calls me LaLa. My 4-H kids call me LaLa, my grandkids call me LaLa, my friends call me LaLa, everybody calls me. So when we got the farm, that's what Rick said, we're going to call it LaLa Farm. So that's how we got it. Hey y'all, this is LaLa at LaLa Farm. We're out here in the Florida winter weather. It's 46 degrees and windy and rainy and cold. So you get me in my full farm regalia. So today I'm going to be talking to you about just some basic goat knowledge. What to think about before you get goats. So before you get goats, the number one thing you have to do is figure out why you want those goats. What's your reason behind wanting those goats? Do you want pets? Do you want meat goats? Do you want dairy goats? If you want meat goats, are you wanting meat goats for your own consumption, or are you wanting them to sell for others' consumption? If you want dairy goats, are you wanting those for yourself to make different things such as yogurts or cheese, or just to milk for your own consumption? There's a lot of things that you need to consider before you get your goats. You also want to consider, some people want goats to clear land, and others want goats to breed for other breeders to enhance a breed. For example, we raise Kiko goats. All of ours are registered through the National Kiko Registry, and we register ours so that other people can purchase them and get into the breeding and production that way. So know what you want. Here comes the rain! Oh joy! So you need to know what it is you want goats for. That's something you really have to consider prior to getting goats. There's a lot of different breeds. There's a lot of different reasons for those breeds. Some of them are multi-purpose. Some of them are very specific. So why you want goats will lead you to what breed of goat you want. If you want pets, you may want to look into getting miniatures, depending on how much space you have available. A lot of people for pets, they like pygmies or Nigerian dwarfs. You can always have the larger breeds as a pet as well, but a lot of people prefer smaller breeds for pets. If you want to get into dairy goats, milking, you might want to look into Toggenburgs or Alpines. You actually can milk any goat that has delivered a baby, a kid, and milk them. Now that's going to have, there's different flavors. You'll get a different taste from the milk depending on which one, based on the amount of fat that's in the fat content in the milk. Even Nigerian dwarfs, people milk those a lot for, doing their milk production. I have Nigerian dwarfs. I personally don't milk them, but at some point I would like to start doing so. So another thing you may want to consider is getting meat goats. There's multiple different breeds of meat goats. I raise Kikos. I have boars, but my boars are more for my granddaughter to show. I'll tell you what, boars are just not my thing. And there's myotonics. Those are another meat goat. You wouldn't think so because everybody loves a myotonic. Those are the ones that get running and all of a sudden they go like that and they tip over, and so if you want to watch some funny videos, those are things to watch because myotonics are hysterical. But they're considered a meat goat. So I've never considered milking a myotonic though. Would they stiffen up and freeze when you go to milk them? That would be funny. I I'll have to look into that. Get back to you. Another type is dual purpose. I mentioned that earlier. Nubians are dual purpose, which, you know, I never got that because Nubians give great milk. They're phenomenal, but they're tall and skinny. Their legs are kind of stilt-like. Rick calls ours an anorexic goat. She's not. She's just tall and skinny. So, you know, I guess the meat to bone ratio on a Nubian would be a little bit different. So, and Nigerian dwarfs are also considered a dual purpose. I mean, you could eat any goat, but you have to remember what the meat to bone ratio is going to be. So if you decide you want to process a Kiko, you're going to get a lot more meat off a Kiko than you will off a Nigerian dwarf. So those are things to consider. That's going to determine which direction you go in with which breed. Once you've decided, okay, I want goats, I really want goats, you need to consider your infrastructure. That means fencing, housing, feeding, all of those things that go into raising goats. Fencing is critical. If water can run through a fence, a goat will get through the fence. I know, you know, you're thinking to yourself, no, not really. Yes, really. So, perfect example is, everyone has always told us, be careful with your bucks. They'll break through a fence to get to the does. Be careful with your bucks. Make sure they're kept off. Well, when we first bred our first set of does, we had a few that weren't quite of age. So I kept them out. But they were on the same fence line. You know, those two little girls busted through that woven red top fence to get in with the buck. Not the buck busting through to get in with those two little does that were in full heat. They broke through the fence to get into the buck. So yes, they will break through a fence. It will happen. Be prepared. Fencing is a continuous, ongoing fact of farm life. It never ends. Even if you get all your pastures and all your paddocks put up, somewhere down the line, a goat's going to tear through the fence. A tree's going to fall on the fence. Something's going to happen that you're going to have to repair a fence. So just face facts, folks. When it comes to goats, or any livestock for that matter, on farm life, you will constantly be doing fencing. It never ends. But those are things you have to take into consideration too. What type of fence are you going to use? There's multiple ones you can do. You can do a red top roll fence, which is the kind where it just rolls out and you hook it to a T-post and you put up H-braces and that type of thing. And there's ones where people just do panels. We put, as you can see here, these are what's called a panel. They're stiff, they're welded together. These are what we put in our stall area because, face it, putting rolled fencing in here would be really difficult. And then around our pastures, we did the red top rolled fence where you have to unroll it. And there's videos out there for that if you want to learn how to put up fencing. Big Rick and Little Rick did some incredible videos showing how to put up the fencing. We used 4-inch. When I say 4-inch, I mean this little area here. This is a 4-inch section. So we use that for the red top rolls, and we use that on our panels, was a 4-inch. Looking back, now that I do have some Nigerians, I wish that we did do some sections in a 2x4-inch section, which actually it's 4 inches tall, 2 inches wide, because the Nigerian babies can get out through the little 4-inch sections. They're that tiny when they're first born, they can get out of those 4-inch sections. So that's something really important to consider when you consider what type of goat you're going to get. If you're going to get a miniature, their babies are small. The average birth weight of a Nigerian dwarf is about 2 pounds or slightly above that. Those are tiny. They sound like little kittens when they're first born. So they're really tiny. They can fit through these holes without any problems at all. Whereas a Kiko, the average birth weight is between, I'd say 6 and 10 pounds. And they're pretty good size. They can stick their heads through the hole, but their body's not going to get through there. So that's something very important that you want to take into consideration when you're putting up your fencing. What type of goats am I going to have? Am I going to have miniatures that have tiny babies that can get out? You want to make sure there's no gaps in between the posts and the fencing, or your stalls and your posts that the fence connects to, because they will find a way to get out of there. And the other thing to consider is shelter. Some people just take metal roofing and will form like a hoop attached to some 2x4s that have been made into a base. As long as they can get out of the weather, that is very, very important. And I'm not just talking about rain, I'm talking about wind, the heat, especially here in Florida and the southern states. You want those animals to be able to get out of the heat, so they need to have some shelter. Goats don't like rain, most goats don't like rain, I should say. So they'll want to get out of any of the, of rain. Even a light mist will bring my goats running to the barn. So take into consideration, am I going to have a full barn? Am I going to have a pole barn? Am I going to have stalls? Will I need those stalls for birthing purposes? My Kikos, I just let them have their kids out in the pasture. I got a couple that find the farthest tree away. They pick the coldest night of the year, the rainiest night of the year, and they'll drop triplets out under a tree clear way out in the back of the pasture where I have to go search for them. I don't let my dwarfs do that, okay? My dwarfs, I contain them when they get close to birth in their individual stalls. Reason being, again, they have little tiny babies. Their babies fit in the palm of my hand, and they sound like kittens. They're that tiny. So I have predators in my area. We have hawks, we have osprey. Osprey tend to go towards fish, but they will circle around out here. We have owls, big owls, and we even have 2 American eagles, which are beautiful to watch, but scary when you've got babies out in the pasture, because that's what they're looking for. Mine are born, my Nigerian dwarfs are born underneath the roof line. We do have a pole barn, as you can see, it's completely open, but we do have stalls. But I keep them under the roof line so that they're not seen from the air by the hawks and stuff like that. We know a gentleman where we got some of our goats from, actually. He actually knows somebody up, I believe the guy he knows is up in Georgia. And you know those wind things on the top of semi-trucks that deflect the wind as they're driving down? Well, he knows a guy up in Georgia who takes those off when he does repairs and stuff, and they were just gonna trash them. So he got a bunch of those from this guy. So when you drive onto his property, you see all these little dome hut things out there for the goats to take shelter in, and they work fantastic. So it doesn't have to be a big pole barn. It doesn't have to be, some people buy those little portable sheds, and they'll use those. Those are fantastic. But it doesn't have to be something like that. You can build something easy enough. Just make sure they're able to get out of the elements. Hot coffee, because it's so cold. The type of breed you get determines what your feed needs are. There's different types of feeding. When I say feeding, I mean, what are they going to eat? Browse. Goats are browsers. Sheep are grazers. Goats are browsers. The difference is the sheep will eat the grass off the ground. They like to just get down there and nibble, kind of like a cow does, eating the grass off the ground. Goats are more along the lines of how deer eat. They like to eat up off the ground. They like to eat weeds and vines and tree limbs that hang low. They like to eat the leaves off those and stuff like that. That's considered browse, okay, pasture type things. But when I say pasture, I'm talking about overgrown stuff. I'm not talking about where you seed the pasture. You can, it's great. That works as well, as long as you let it grow up high enough. You don't want your goats eating right off the ground, because that's where the parasites are, and that's how they acquire parasites. So you don't want them nibbling down close to the blades of grass on the ground. You want them eating up higher. So if you can get a pasture area that's pretty overgrown with weeds and different things like that, and let them go in there, that's fantastic. Hay is another thing that you have to consider. Okay, so goats are ruminants, and they, like cows, they regurgitate and chew their cud. So one of the things they have to have is this stuff called long strand, and that's hay. Okay, straw is on the ground, hay is what they eat. So down here in Florida, we don't have a lot of straw, so we use hay. But if you're in further north, you'll know what the difference between straw and hay. I always remembered it as straw starts with an S, so you step on it. Hay is, they eat it, so hey, let's eat. Hay is important. They do need that long strand. It stimulates the inside of the rumen, helps with rumen production, digestion, that type of thing. You also need to consider, are you going to grain your goats? When you have goats that are lactating, you're going to have to give them some grain. If you have limited resources with regards to pasture, you may have to supplement grain. So that is specific to farm. I've had a lot of people contact me and say, hey, how do you feed your goats? What do you feed your goats? How often do you feed your goats? How much do you feed your goats? Well, I've been doing this for years, and I still switch around because it's a matter of finding what works for you. The reason why it would be different from this farm to, say, Dusty Goat Homestead or the Keener's Homestead, the reason why it would be different is because every place has a different mineral content to their soil. You don't know what that farm was used for or that land was used for previously, so you don't know if different crops were raised that would have depleted certain minerals from that soil. On our property here, on these 20 acres, we know of two things that were grown on this property. This at one point had a palm tree farm growing on it. Again, that will pull certain nutrients and minerals out of the soil. At another point, it was used for raising peas. A pea crop was on this property. That's why it's very important. You can have a mineral sampling done on your property. Contact your local extension office. Tell them you want them to come out and look at the different plants on your property to see what would be healthy for your goats, which wouldn't be healthy for your goats. Hey there, this is Snicker. See, I told you, they can fit their head through these little 4-inch squares. So this is Snicker. He is a cross between a Kiko and a boar goat. He's one of Madeline's babies. So those are things to consider. And it's very important that you make sure that you research what plants are on your property, because there's ones that can negatively impact your goats. There's ones that are poisonous to goats. We had wild cherry trees on this property. When those leaves fall off and they decay, they are deadly to goats. So those are things you want to look for and consider when you're looking at a piece of property to put goats on. Don't just bring them home and let them loose and not know what's out there. Azaleas, which are huge in the state of Florida, they'll kill a goat. So you don't want them eating off azalea bushes. So those are all things to consider. So where do you get your goats? Well, you can get your goats at an auction house. I don't recommend it. Typically, animals that are at the auction house are ones that the seller was unable to sell or was culling from their herd or that type of thing. Plus, auction houses, you get a lot of animals. You get a lot of animals from different places into those auction houses, and a lot of illnesses and stuff will pass through. Any number of things, coccidia, pneumonia, pink eye, those are all things that you would be bringing back to your farm. If you do purchase an animal from an auction house, make absolutely certain that you isolate the animal before you let them into your herd, and put them on a piece of land or into a separate structure that other goats aren't going to be in, that if they were to develop some type of illness later on, your animals couldn't pick it up from there. You can get animals from other breeders. If you go on to different register sites, say you want to look at Nigerian dwarfs, the American Dairy Goat Association would be a site that you could go to and find breeders in your area. The National Kiko Registry, the American Kiko Goat Association, those all put lists on there of breeders who are a part of their organization and who register their animals through there. You can get them from individual farms. That's one of the things I highly recommend, is getting them from an individual farm where you know someone, you know, research your area, talk to people in your area, other people that have animals and stuff, get suggestions from them as to where, you know, where did they get their animals? Do they know of people that are reputable that would be good to get animals from? So you could do that. I highly recommend doing farm visits. We have farm visits here all the time. We just had one this weekend. We got another one next weekend. So we have people come out to the farm all the time. They don't always want to buy a goat. Sometimes they just want to come and see our setup and check things out. Don't take it at face value. You know, you get someone who says, hey, I'm selling this goat, I'll meet you halfway. Think about that. Unless you've really researched that person and talked to people who bought goats from them and stuff like that, that would be a little bit of a red flag for me. If I said, hey, can I come to your farm and check things out, instead of meeting halfway, and they said, well, no, you know, we don't have visitors, I would not buy from that person. Because to me, that's just kind of like, okay, you don't want me to see your setup, you don't want me to see your other goats, I'm not comfortable with that. I like going to different farms and checking things out. I like to see the cleanliness, I like to see the condition of their other animals. Those are things to consider. You can buy from sales, specific sales, show sales is what I'm talking about. The National Kiko Registry, I know I keep going to them, but that's who I'm familiar with. They do sales throughout the year where they have, in their conferences, they're not just sales. You'll go and they'll have 2 days worth where the animals will be set up so you can inspect the animals and see the animals that you're going to be bidding on, because they do it auction style. But while you're up there, you're getting to meet the people that brought their animals for consignment. You get to sit through different classes. That's where Rick and I got our FAMACHA certification done. That's where we learned how to assess a goat, what to look for. We even learned how to do our own fecals, where you take them and you use a McMaster slide and you put it underneath a microscope and count the number of worm eggs in the McMaster slide. Okay, so we learned how to do those things there, and that's where we got our fierce goats. Now I will tell you this, if you go to one of those types of sales, you are going to be bidding against other people for quality animals. People pick out their quality animal and they say, oh, I'm taking this one, and you're going to be bidding against other people, and it gets pricey. You may walk away paying $12.50 for a goat that you could have got for $7.50 on farm had you gone to the farm. But it's also part of the fun of it. So I've done it both ways, and I like the sales, I like the excitement of the sale, but I don't like the money that I spend at sales, so I stopped doing that. I still go to those events because I like to meet up with the other breeders, and I like to see things that are going on and learn new things. The reason why we don't purchase from those sales as often as we did before was because we've established our line. We've got the bloodlines in there that we wanted, that we researched, that we chose to build our herd, our foundation herd. And so now we're building from within. So we really don't have the need to go to those types of sales. Doesn't mean we don't enjoy it. We do. And I'll be honest, sometimes I go and I fake bid, where if somebody's calling out a bid, I'll sit there and I'll say, yep, yep, yep. Because I'm thinking, you know, if I were bidding, that's what I would be bidding. But I don't bid anymore. And Rick is very thankful of that, I'm sure. So now that we've talked about what type of breeds you might be interested in and where to buy them and stuff like that, now we get down to the nitty-gritty, the critical. assessing the goat before you buy. I cannot stress this enough. Do not buy a goat if you cannot assess it and get your hands on it. I know of people that have bought goats from a distance that said, hey, I'm going to buy, I want to buy this goat. I saw it on MeWe and I want this goat. And they've gotten the goat brought to them by animal transport, which is available. I'm not knocking it, okay? But they've gotten that animal brought to them. When it gets to them, it's not as bright and shiny and new as what they saw in the pictures. You want to do hands-on. You want to check a FAMACHA. Now, FAMACHA is important. Look that word up. It's see? Can't even spell it. FAMACHA, FAMACHA. But that is where you're checking for anemia. And it involves pressing on the top of the eyelid and pulling the other eyelid down. That's very important, okay? But don't just depend on that. There's other things you want to look for. You want to look at their eyes, not just for the FAMACHA reason. You want those eyes to be bright and shiny and healthy. You don't want them to be goopy. You don't want them to be dull. And when a goat doesn't feel well, it's almost like looking at a little kid where their eyes are just kind of like bleh. You don't want that look. You want their eyes to be bright, shiny, healthy, no crusty pus. I mean, they may have a little bit of tiny discharge, which you could get from hay, a little irritant in the eye. That's fine. You want to look at the hair around the eye. Do they have full hair around the eye? If the hair is lost around the eye, that is indicative of a mineral deficiency. So those are things you want to look at. You want to look at how are they presenting themselves physically? Are they standing upright? Are they strong when they stand up, or are they all hunched over? If you've got a goat that's hunched over, that usually means they don't feel very well, okay? You want to look at their coat. You want it to be shiny and silky, and you don't want it to be coarse and dull, okay? Coarse and dull can be indicative of a mineral deficiency. It can also indicate that they have external parasites, lice, mites, that type of thing. And those are things that can be treated, but again, you want to look at those things when you're assessing the goat. You want to look at their hoof condition. Lift their foot off, see if there's a lot of overgrowth. Has the person been trimming the hooves, and taking care of the feet the way they should be? You don't want it to be growing over and into the foot. You want them to be upright on the pasture, and you don't want them to be slit, their foot to fall back like this. You want them to be upright and firm. You want to look at their energy level. Are they, when they get up and walk, are they kind of lulling and lagging behind? Are they walking confidently and holding their back, upright and lifting their feet and their legs properly? You want to look at the tail. I don't always go by the tail though, because there's a lot of different things that'll bring the tail down in a goat, okay? If they feel intimidated by something, or they're stressed over something or something like that, sometimes that'll bring their tail down. So, it's great. You want to see an upright tail, but don't always go by the tail, because I just don't feel that that's a true reflection of the animal itself. You want to, I know this sounds crazy, but you've all heard me talk about it before. Poop is critical. Watch the poop of your goats. It's very important. My grandkids are so used to it with me about poop that now they'll see something and they'll say, hey, LaLa, that one's got clumpy poop, or that one's got dog poop, or something like that. So even my grandkids know, watch the poop of the goat. Goats poop all the time. They don't care where they are. I've seen goats poop on their kids while they were nursing, so it just happens. You want them to come out looking like little blueberries, round, circular, firm, okay? You don't want it to come out clumpy like dog poop or like soft serve ice cream or something like that. Check that goat's butt out too. See if they've got any type of residue on their butt and going down the back of their legs or the back of the tail, because that'll indicate whether or not they had diarrhea. And diarrhea can indicate any number of things. It can indicate coccidia, worms, a change of feed will cause diarrhea, different things like that. So those are all things you want to, keep in mind when you're looking at it. The color of the poop indicates different illnesses and stuff like that.
So basically, when you go and you look at an animal, if you go to buy an animal and you're assessing the animal and putting your hands on it, you know, feel for the ribs, feel for the spine. If you can get your fingers down in between the vertebrae of the spine, it's not very healthy. It needs more weight on it, okay? Also, take into consideration the socialness of the animal, okay? That animal, when I say social, I don't just mean with people. I mean with other animals in the herd. If you've got one where the herd is up here and they're all browsing and nibbling away and having, you know, a little party together, and you've got one who's all the way out on the other side of the pasture and they're just kind of looking kind of blah, and they're eating by themselves, that's something that's indicating something that you need to be aware of, okay? Pay attention to that. You also want to look at the socialness with humans. Is that animal afraid of humans? Now remember, that animal's not familiar with you, so it may be skittish around you until it gets to know you. But is it skittish with the farmer that's trying to sell it? Are you willing to take in an animal that is not people friendly? Okay, let's look at basic health needs now, okay? You need to make sure that they're fed up off the ground. I use these feeding troughs. I bring my goats in because that way it allows me to assess them. So I can see them, check everybody, make sure everybody's healthy, make sure everybody's coming up to eat. That way I know if one of them's gone off somewhere by themselves, I need to go find them and see what's going on. But I use these troughs to eat. When I feed, I hang the trough up high. I don't want my goats eating off the ground if I can avoid that. I try to feed them up high. I also make sure that their hay isn't put on the ground. Some people feed the hay on the ground, which is fine. That's their choice. I don't want to feed my hay on the ground. Number one, they're going to waste more of it than they would if it was in a feeder, because they don't like to eat off the ground. So they'll only eat a certain amount of the hay, and then they're going to leave the rest of it down there because it's too low to the ground. So to me, that just wastes more hay. So I try to avoid that. Those are things to take into consideration. You want to make sure that when you're feeding, that they have a clean area to eat from. That's how diseases pass through. So those are things you want to look at as well. So we talked about minerals in the soil, okay, nutrients in the soil. Goats need a good, high quality mineral. I personally use Sweet Licks Meat Maker. It's worked great even for my dairy goats. I use it for them as well. My Nigerian dwarfs, I use the Sweet Licks Meat Maker. It works really well for them, and it's a good quality mineral. There's a lot of different ones out there. Research them, but they do need a free choice mineral. Now, when I say free choice, what I'm talking about is putting out minerals and just leaving them out so that the goat can go up and eat when they need to. Goats will determine, their body will tell them what they need, and they'll eat that mineral to get what they need from that mineral. Now, I personally don't leave mine out free choice. I know a lot of people frown on that. I can just hear some of the, goat breeders that I'm affiliated with. I can just hear them cringing at that, going, oh. I don't, and the reason being is my environment. Our humidity is extremely high, especially in the summer months, and minerals will just suck the moisture out of the air, and it causes them to get goopy and gross, and goats won't eat it because they're picky that way. So when someone says, oh, goats will eat anything, no, they won't. They won't eat moist minerals. They don't like them. They don't want to have them. They won't put their mouth on them. They'll cringe and turn their head away. So mine, I put them out. My goats know what the cup looks like. After I bring them in and do anything that I have to do with them, if I want them to go out, I'll grab a thing of minerals and a scoop, and I'll take that out, and I'll yell, go, 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 because that's how I call my goats. And they'll all come running out, and that's when they eat their minerals. So parasites, I touched on that a little bit. Those are things that you need to be aware of when you own goats. You need to know what to watch for. When I talk about parasites, I'm talking about internal and external parasites. Internal parasites, of course, is worms. That can be barber pole, that can be roundworms, that can be hookworms, that can be tapeworms. And all of those things affect your goat. So you'll want to learn how to determine, learn how to do your own fecal worm count or egg count, or learn how to take a sample to take to your vet or someone else so that they can determine what type of worms you're treating. Now, if you don't have that opportunity, if you don't have that available to you, there are other things that you can do. Okay. Oh, hold on. Look at there. Time to feed a baby. My alarm just went off. It's time to feed the babies. Worms are detrimental to a goat's health. External parasites would be blood-sucking lice, mites. They can really negatively impact the health of your animal as well. The way you tell for lice is just like you would for your humans. You check their hair for little lice. But the good thing is, when I say lice, I know there are people out there going, oh, lice. They're not transferable from the goat to human. They're specific to that animal. So they're not fleas, they're lice. And they do get them. And you can treat them. It's a simple treatment. Mites. The mites burrow into the skin and it can cause all kinds of problems for the animal. So you want to learn how to check for those. That's dry, scaly, nasty, red, flaky areas on your goats, and learn how to treat those. So these are things that you need to be aware of when you get a goat. It's not like you're just going to get this animal and it's going to be healthy, happy, and bouncy the whole time. There are things that are going to impact that goat's health, and you need to be aware of those things and how to look for them, how to identify them, and how to treat them. In conclusion, there are several common errors that people make when they're first starting out with goats. A common error that people make is unrealistic expectations. Cost, time, health. Number 2 common error is the number of goats a person gets. It's really important to know that goats are social animals. Do not get one goat and stick it in your yard as your pet. They need to have another goat. Getting too many goats to start out with. Before you bring 10 home, bring 2 home. Common error number 3 is overlooking routine care. Those are things that are very important to the care and overall health of that animal. When they overlook those daily needs or those routine things, that will impact the health, the overall health of the goat and the herd. Common starter error number 4, bucks. Don't get your buck until you are sure of what your goals are and until you are sure of how to manage does or wethers. Common error number 5, failure to educate yourself. I cannot stress it enough. You need to educate yourself on goats before you bring the goats home. Number 6 is failure to continue to educate yourself. Don't always think you know it all because you've experienced and you've been through it. That's not always the case. There's different things that you could learn from other people, that you can learn from other resources. Keep educating yourself. Always continue to educate yourself, okay? So those are the 6 common errors that new goat owners make. I hope this has been helpful to you. Check out some of the other videos that I mentioned, and contact us if you need, any type of support or just want to talk goats. Thanks for watching. LaLa, saying so long. Remember, always be kind to each other.